Disinformation, the silent invader of our lives, is dangerously changing our decisions and attitudes more than ever before. Good evening. My name is Maia Mazurkiewicz, and welcome to the first episode of Anatomy of Disinformation. Disinformation is one of the biggest challenges facing humanity today. Politicians, experts, and journalists are trying to find a solution, but we are getting lost. On this show, we'll explore how disinformation works. In recent years, we've seen how disinformation campaigns have impacted elections, fueled conflicts, and manipulated public opinion around the world. From Russian interference in the 2016 US presidential election and the spread of false information during the COVID-19 pandemic to the war in Ukraine and cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, hybrid threats have become a major challenge to global security. Our first guest is leading efforts to counter FIMI on the part of the Polish government.
Tomasz Chłoń, diplomat, researcher specializing in international relations, disinformation and hybrid threats. Polish Foreign Minister's Special Representative for Countering International Disinformation, Director of the Polish MFA's Department for Strategic Communications and Countering Foreign Disinformation, member of the Polish Prime Minister's Commission investigating Russian and Belarusian influence, former Polish ambassador to Estonia and Slovakia, Director of the NATO Information Office in Moscow.
Tomasz, welcome to the first episode of Anatomy of Disinformation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
So, tell me, why disinformation? What is disinformation, and why you personally are so committed to countering it? Before we dive deeply into the work that you're doing right now, you've been also working in the NATO's Moscow office, so I guess that you know disinformation from the background.
Well, that's probably why I'm here. But disinformation is a security problem. It's a security, strategic, social problem, and that's why I have been appointed to counter foreign disinformation as the plenipotentiary of the foreign minister.
You're leading all the efforts in the area.
Yes, because there is a need for a focal point.
And coming back to disinformation, you've been researching that from before as well, and looking on Russian influence and other foreign actors' influence already, especially at the elections, right? Because disinformation is changing the attitudes. It's really interfering in our electoral process and interfering in our thought process, right?
Yes.
So,
I mean, the reason why I was picked for this job are threefold. First of all, as I said, it's a security issue, and I have been dealing with security policy and foreign policy issues for decades. The second is you need to know the main perpetrator, and it's Russia. And as you said, I served as director of the NATO Information Office in Moscow, heading it from Brussels. And the third thing is to know what you are talking about. And since I've been doing research on the topic and even written a book, I think that qualifies in the eyes of the decision makers to do the job properly.
the institutions have been working on countering disinformation, but really from this year, I would say, there is a big change in the perception of the politicians and decision makers of how to do it.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. You know, the first reaction to Russian disinformation was rather weak after Crimea, then, you know, even after the elections in the United States in 2016, the elections in France, although France started to counter it quite vigorously. I should say. But you asked what is disinformation. Disinformation is when you disinform somebody intentionally to cause harm. That's the definition in the European Union, but it's widely accepted. But what's more important and more dangerous is a coordinated efforts, intentional efforts to attain strategic objectives, right? And that's about interfering in elections, to change our perception of how we view the political landscape at home, or in Europe, or globally, and then change or influence our decisions. So, and disinformation is quite often, or most often, a part of hybrid attacks against.
And those are like Operation Influence, right? Very much coordinated, but only how actually Russia does it, or other actors.
Just give you an example from our from Poland, and the Russian disinformers attacked a website of a military hospital, and they published an article, a fake article, on Polish soldiers, wounded soldiers who fight it in Ukraine, right? So here you have an attempt to undermine, the people's trust in the policy of the government. Another attempt, well, an example, it's a classical example from the elections in the United States, when on Facebook, Russian actors or agents convened two simultaneous demonstrations in Houston, heart of Texas. Those who support migration and those who are anti. It was a miracle that nothing happened, but we know very well, I mean, from the last weeks, what happened in the United Kingdom.
Exactly, that's also been caused by disinformation, actually.
Disinformation, yes, but although this is not, I mean, the Brits are not quite clear who is behind it, were Russians involved. It's obvious that the Channel 3 had some I mean, the people who owned the channel and were responsible for at least the beginning of the disinformation regarding that tragic accident. So they were connected to Russia somehow, but there's no proof. And here is a dilemma, for us. We are supposed to counter foreign disinformation. What happens if the Russians use proxies, right?
Exactly.
Local agents, local influencers, and there is no proof, direct proof. I mean, this is one of the problems.
But those are the tactics as well that you're seeing,
right?
Yes. And that's like very classic example, because one of the harms that the disinformers or the actors that are using disinformation is trying to do is to polarize and destabilize the societies, right?
Right. And the Russians know very well that Sputnik and RT have no place in Poland. I mean, they are ineffective.
So what are the most important things that you are right now doing at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? I know that cooperation and coordination is very important in terms of the whole society approach, but also working with other governments. We
have the presidency in the European Union, so we are preparing an ambitious program for the presidency. First, we want to strengthen the resilience of the member states and the union itself. We know how to do it. We want to be more offensive. We want to make the sanctions be more effective. Easily to agree upon, and then implement it. And then the third one is to engage the civil society, this whole of society approach, all hands on deck.
Perfect. Presidency is starting soon. We're seeing how disinformation is affecting Poland and other countries, and I hope that your joining forces will really make a change. Thank you for joining us, Tomasz.
Thank you, Mia.
The use of disinformation isn't just limited to Europe. In this next segment, Saman Nazari from the Alliance for Europe organization tells us how disinformation was used in a geopolitical dispute between China and Japan.
In 2023, Japan started releasing treated wastewater from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that the release would have little impact on people and the environment. Despite this, China launched a comprehensive influence operation, trying to discredit Japan and spread fear about the treated wastewater release. The influence operation reframed the treated nuclear wastewater as contaminated nuclear wastewater, claiming that the wastewater would reach the US and Australia, contaminating fish all over the Pacific. The Chinese Communist Party's Central Propaganda Department and similar structures in the Chinese government have strong control over the media apparatus in China, including the ability to tell them which stories to prioritize. The campaign had both overt and covert parts. In the overt part, we saw Chinese state-controlled media, journalists and diplomats publishing hundreds of posts and articles containing cartoons, infographics, polls, videos, and even a choreographed music video. Their aim was to cause fear, and they were trying to discredit Japan. They used scientifically sounding terms and graphics to try to portray the treated wastewater as dangerous and threatening. A common technique that they employed was the amplification of critical foreign voices, labeling them as experts, using them to give legitimacy to their own narratives. Other than this more overt part of the influence operation, China also mobilized some of the more covert assets. The first type was covert Chinese state-controlled media channels and projects that portray themselves as independent entities. An interesting example of this is a covert project that offered content creators money to produce critical videos regarding the wastewater release. Another was a covert state media self-proclaimed fact-checker who spread disinformation in the shape of fact-checking videos, tweets, and infographics. The second type was covert Chinese state-controlled influencers, who have their own brands and hide their connection and employment with Chinese state-controlled media. The third type was different coordinated networks of inauthentic accounts that flooded Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and even smaller social media platforms like Tumblr, with content promoting the operation's narratives. In this campaign, we saw China employ inauthentic manipulative behaviors in an attempt to strike fear in the target audience and discredit Japan through a massive coordinated campaign. What's relevant here is not the truthfulness of the content per se, but the manipulative behavior and the scale of the coordination of this operation.
Long live Belarus! This rallying cry echoed through the streets of Minsk as thousands of people demanded their voices be heard. With opposition rallies flooding the city's squares and police standing by, ready to disperse the crowds. In a country where the government tightly controls information and cracks down on independent media, the struggle for free speech and accurate reporting is more important than ever. Our guest today is researching and countering disinformation in Central and Eastern Europe.
Maryia Sadouskaya-Komlach, Chairwoman of the Board of Free Press for Eastern Europe. Media development specialist, editor and journalist with over 15 years of experience, researcher with a focus on democratic transitions, human rights, media in closed environments and disinformation. Expert with international experience, having worked in over 20 countries including Belarus, the US, the Czech Republic, Poland, Belgium, the Netherlands and France. Author and advisor on media projects including for the European Endowment for Democracy, where she advised on its feasibility study on Russian-language media initiatives. Director of Free Press for Eastern Europe at Free Press Unlimited and a freelancer contributing to European media outlets.
Maryia, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Your day job involves countering disinformation and researching foreign influence. You're originally from Belarus, but you live in Poland for years now. But your cases that you're researching are mostly coming from the Eastern Europe. I have a question. Is Russia the biggest player, or there are also other actors that are using disinformation?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because when we speak about disinformation, we not necessarily always mean fake news or something that is wrong. Disinformation is a behavior that wants to target people to make them believe that something doesn't exist. But very often it's about the true facts, about things that are happening, just given a different interpretation of that. And of course, there are many players, commercial players, who do it for their benefit. There are politicians of all different beliefs who want to use disinformation. But if we speak about the players who use informational influence for the malign purposes, for the purposes of harming the societies, harming democracy, then I think Russia, China, and some other countries are definitely the leaders, and Russia is the leader in the region.
Do you have any particular examples, like maybe from your country of origin?
Well, I mean, Belarus has been an interesting example of the limits of Russia's originated disinformation and fake news. Belarusians have been able to watch without any restriction in the package of free-to-air TV channels Russian propaganda for decades. And yet, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Belarusians overwhelmingly, even according to the state polling, said no to any involvement of their country's troop in this invasion. It shows that, yes, Russia is trying to exert pressure, informational influence and dominance, but in a fully Russian-speaking and understanding society, which is bilingual but still uses Russian, it is still impossible to change people's behavior and attitudes if you have a market of independent, high-quality media, which Belarus has.
And that's a very important examples, right? Because in countering disinformation, it's not only institutions that are doing it, but also the media and the fact-checkers and the civil society organizations. You're one of them, right? So what exactly you are doing in your work?
Well, we're trying to, we say sometimes, herd the cats. We're trying to help institutions which normally compete with each other, for example, media, which normally are very competitive, or let's say different political parties or NGOs who fight for donor funding in certain countries, to understand the challenges that we're dealing with. This information manipulation are so big and so potentially dangerous, especially when it comes about medicine, public health, trust to authorities to protect your borders, that first of all, authorities have to think more about media and their trust index, but media should understand that they need to rely more on expertise and find good experts instead of just doing he said and she said journalism. We build this partnership, we build networks, including Science Plus, the network of Central Eastern European media fact-checkers and experts, and we're trying to find solutions which would be cheap to implement and very efficient, and when we find them, probably we will become billionaires. But for now, we're still modestly successful, and we see that this works. Especially, just to finish, especially to prevent disinformation from spreading further and not just countering something that is already very popular.
And how are you preventing that disinformation?
Yes, this is where the $1 billion comes in, right? But look, you do it by making sure that when people are in doubt, they turn to the trusted source, and the trusted source has information it can share. What happened during coronavirus? People wanted to turn to the trusted media, but trusted media couldn't do anything except for quoting the same expert time after time, sometimes pediatrician, on what coronavirus is. Now, the problem is, and what Russia uses and some others, is it's much easier to say something is wrong, to come up with some total unimaginable, inflated story than to fact-check the truth. But if over time, you as a media outlet, you as a government, you as an NGO, you as a public communicator, do not provide people clear, simple and honest answers about what is dangerous or not regarding your personal health. Were there any misdoings when we bought some protective masks? Was everything good when we introduced vaccines? People will start trusting disinfo actors more. So we're trying to build this capacity of media, but also experts and governments to talk more frankly to people and to give them information that they deserve.
Positive and real information that you are really having the trusted sources, right? Because trust is one of the things that also the governments that are using this information, but also other actors are trying to diminish.
Yeah, the trust is not built overnight. It's lost overnight. right? And the problem of Central Eastern European societies, which we all are part of, maybe some of us would prefer to be called Western Europe, but let's say we're still in that region, is that due to our socialist past, we have this very natural distrust of authorities and that they mean good for the public. So Russia enters this ground and tries to influence people not in the way that, believe Putin and support what he does in Ukraine. Russia also understands that people in Poland, people in Belarus would not buy it. But it said, look at this West, it has double faces, it is very liberal, it's very anti-Christian, anti-conservative. It goes against our Slavic values and the way of life, or Christian values, as in South Caucasus. And through this conservative frame, Russia tries to say, maybe we're not the best, but at least we will protect you from something that really makes a turmoil of your life. And I do believe that the actors in the so-called West, and also democratic Central Eastern European countries, are not paying enough attention to it. Think it is all domestic agenda and it's people's beliefs, and but the studies show that even in Canada, people of more conservative beliefs, more xenophobic beliefs, are more likely to believe that Russia is not guilty in the invasion of Ukraine.
Exactly, and it seems that Russians really knows us well, right? They really kind of are touching the points that are vulnerable for people.
Yeah, I wish we invested so much money and attention in studying interests of underserved groups. Look at Czech Republic. When a Ukrainian man stabbed to death a Roma, a Czech origin Roma living there, the first people who started defending the rights of Roma were Czech far right, very often associated with Russia, because Russia immediately saw a potential to put Ukrainians and Roma against each other and started spreading fake news about pogroms and more deaths, and people started coming to the refugee camps of Ukrainians in fear. Very fortunately, Czech government, with the help of media and civil society, and our project actually, started educating everyone in the society, including the Roma community, about the danger of such disinformation, and that episode never led to more tragic cases. But Russia will always use such tensions which are not obvious and which are not directly related to what it does in Ukraine right now.
Last question. What people can do to defend themselves? One sentence.
Support the media that you trust.
Maria, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
We've introduced a lot of new terms in this episode. To wrap up, let's take a look at these words and their meanings.
Disinformation is false or misleading content that is spread with an intention to deceive or secure economic or political gain, and which may cause public harm. In contrast, foreign information manipulation and interference, FIMI, is a broader pattern of behavior aimed at disrupting values and political processes. FIMI is carried out in a deliberate and coordinated way by both state and non-state actors, often using proxies. While FIMI is often labeled as disinformation, it goes beyond just spreading false information. Not all disinformation is FIMI, and FIMI involves more than just disinformation.
Thank you for joining us. I hope today's episode has made you more aware of the types of information you encounter. Next week, we'll explore how emotions are used to influence our daily lives and how fear can make us more vulnerable to manipulation. Keep calm. Think deeply.